Ladies and gentlemen, please be seated. We are about to start this event. Thank you very much. Please be seated. Welcome, everyone, to the culmination of the COP26 campaign on accelerating transition to sustainable agriculture. You're very welcome this afternoon. Now, as you will all know, the campaign has raised visibility and built momentum for the transformation in agriculture and food systems needed to deliver healthy diets, resilience and prosperity, while at the same time tackling climate change and reversing environmental damage. It builds on the Just Rural Transition initiative which was launched in 2019 to build a community of purpose. It is focused on policy action and agricultural innovation. It has involved peer exchange through policy dialogues co-hosted by the incoming COP presidency and by the World Bank, and wide-ranging stakeholder engagement through the UN Food Systems Summit, and of course through broad-based collaboration on research, development and innovation. So today we welcome governments, farmers and other institutions to try to shine a light on actions they are taking to accelerate this tradition, this transition and work together. We have 3 panels for you this afternoon. Our first panel is Solutions Within Reach. Now, as we have already heard, agriculture is of course on the front line of climate change. It is part of the problem, but it is also key to the lasting solutions that we need. Government and farmers around the world are increasingly waking up to this fact and starting to take action. And I am delighted to welcome our panel of policy leaders and farmers, bringing their experience to light and blazing a trail for future policy actions, sharing lessons and future ambition from Brazil, Germany, and Sierra Leone, and from the World Farmers Organization. Now, before we hear from our speakers, let me call to the stage Sabrina and Idris Elba, IFAD UN Goodwill Ambassadors, who are going to make an intervention. Welcome.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for being here. Why am I here? I'm here because agriculture isn't considered sexy, but my wife thinks I am. And
this is true.
And we need to bring some awareness where it's really needed. We've heard a lot about climate change this week and the state of the world, and let's face it, it isn't looking good, all right? Look, we know it, climate change is real. It's here and it's affecting young people, indigenous people, people of color, but eventually we will all pay the price. And this is why we came to Glasgow, to show solidarity for the young people outside marching today, and to push world leaders, push them to act on their fine words and do something with some action. Because we need to shine a light on climate justice, and we need to make food and farming sexy.
No, that's right. Food and farming, something that is always, unfortunately, low on the political agenda. Agriculture should be a priority here at COP, but it's been pushed back. It's been deferred. Food and farming hold a key to ending climate crisis. It holds the key to preserving biodiversity and sustaining life on Earth. Consider this. Every time we eat, we are making a conscious choice about the world that we want to live in. And not a single person, rich or poor, can survive for long without food. Alongside keeping fossil fuels in the ground, we need to fix our food systems. Because if we don't fix how we grow our food and value the people who put food on our tables, the custodians of this earth, we won't survive. It really is that simple. As we heard a few days ago, the climate emergency comes down to a single number: the concentration of carbon in our atmosphere. What we haven't heard is that more than 1/3 of all greenhouse gases are due to food production, and that food production uses about 70% of the world's fresh water. It is driving biodiversity loss. Farms have lost 75% of their plant genetic diversity in the past 100 years. 1 million species are threatened with extinction. Without bees, butterflies, and other pollinators, the human species and most of life on Earth cannot survive.
So that's where smallholder farmers come in, because not all agriculture is equal. Small farms are not a major source of the greenhouse gas emissions. They do not depend heavily on fresh water for crops. They preserve biodiversity instead of depleting it. They are home to a wide range of plants, insects, pollinators. This keeps carbon in the atmosphere and helps regulate the climate. 80% of the world's biodiversity is on indigenous territories, and small family farms grow 1/3 of our food and only 1/10 of the world's farmland. On only 1/10 of the world's farmland. For perspective, think about what it's like to be a farmer, working from dusk till dawn, and then watching your entire year's harvest wiped out because of essentially climate change. Droughts, floods, heat waves, locusts, storms. These are the conditions that farmers in Africa and around the world have to contend with. We saw this firsthand in Sierra Leone, where my parents are from. And it is deeply unfair that the people who contribute so little towards climate change are the ones that bear the brunt of it. And as I said before, farmers around the world are struggling, from India to right here in the UK and the United States. Climate change is already starting to affect global food supplies, and this is going to be an issue for all of us.
So, we are here to call on the world to invest more in these issues and to listen to the voices of the people who we know are most impacted. They should be front and center of the climate discussions. And yet too many activists, like Vanessa Nakate, who are raising inequity issues to climate change, are being ignored, literally cropped out of the picture. We need to revolutionize how people look at food, how it's produced, who produces it, and who consumes it. I want people to understand the true cost of food, environmental, social, and financial, and how we can all help. Small farmers earn only 6 cents for every dollar of food they produce. Farmers who grow 1/3 of the world's food should not be stuck in poverty and hunger themselves. We are so grateful to the smart experts and the leaders in this room who have been working on agricultural policies to make life better for these farmers. So thank you. The solutions are out there. Take this to hell. In the 1980s, IFAD started working with farmers to restore barren land. They helped farmers revive and improve traditional techniques to capture and store rainwater, traditional. Thousands of hectares were restored. Today, the plateaus are covered in trees. Even through drought, there's water in the wells. Villagers produce enough vegetables and to feed themselves, and they can also sell the surplus. All this is thanks to simple and inexpensive techniques that villagers can do themselves. This is just one example. Thanks to the support of IFAD and also organizations like Conservation International, who we proudly sit on the board of, and many of you in this audience, millions of farmers are feeding their families, sending their kids to school, they're supplying local markets, despite COVID, despite climate change. But we need to do much, much more. There are 500 million small farms, and investments are only reaching a small portion of them. For every $18 spent on climate change mitigation, only $1 is spent on adaptation. Only 1.7% of climate funding reaches these communities. That's terrifying. The funding is out there, it just needs to be pointed in the right direction.
We are a young species compared to how long we've been here on this earth. And yet, in a relatively short space of time, we have managed to destroy parts of our planet beyond repair. We have wiped out whole species and vegetation forever. Worse still, we're in danger of wiping ourselves out. Not from just the adverse effects of climate change, but the fact that we might not be able to grow the food that we need to eat. Our appetite for innovation is incredible, but we can't eat innovation, and we certainly can't eat each other. Let's shift our thinking and action in and put this food and agriculture and nature-based solutions at the heart of these discussions. It's time. Thank you so much for listening.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you so much to IFAD UN Goodwill Ambassadors Sabrina and Idris Elba. Now, I'm going to invite World Bank Vice President and CGIAR System Council Chair, Dr. Jürgen Vogel, who's going to speak to us.
Well, hello everyone, and thank you very much to our two ambassadors before you leave. Please give them another round of applause. I thought they laid it out just absolutely perfectly. Took all my talking points, but that's okay. Let me just reiterate how intensely grateful I am and we are that the UK government and the COP presidency elevated this hugely important and so far, I have to be honest, largely neglected topic all the way to the plenary. Thank you so much for doing that. It is about time that we talk about this. Food needs to be on the table, as somebody told me yesterday, on the negotiators' table, because they haven't talked about it for the last 25 years. And let me be very clear. There will not be a solution to climate change unless we fundamentally transform the way we eat, the way we produce our food, and the way we transact our food, and the way we waste our food. We absolutely have to change the way we do this. Otherwise, there will not be a solution to this. As the ambassadors have already pointed out, agriculture is a huge part of the problem, and we can talk a little bit about that, but we don't need to dwell too much on it. It consumes a huge amount of water. It's causing biodiversity loss. We waste about a third of it. If food waste and loss was a country, it would actually contribute, it would be the third largest emitter of greenhouse gas emissions. It would be 8% of all emissions is food waste and loss. Just think about that for a minute. If we don't change that, we cannot change the whole equation. So there's a huge problem there. But what we really need to focus on is that it needs to be part of the solution. In the energy sector and in the transport sector, we've been talking about solutions for a good 2 or 3 decades now. We have solar panels, we have windmills, the technology is being developed. We invested huge amounts of money in new development. Probably $180 to $200 billion per year are invested in these sectors. We now see light at the end of the tunnel. We see at the horizon that a transition is possible. In agriculture, we have invested very little in innovation and in new technologies. It is a fraction of what we invest in other sectors. It's a couple of billion. I see the CGIAR representative Claudia here sitting on. She will be in a panel later and we'll talk more about this. But we have seriously underinvested in the future of our agriculture and food production. So this is a topic that I think policy makers need to take very seriously going forward. Right now in the CGIAR, for instance, we only invest $1 billion per year. We need to invest 2 or 3 times that if we want to evolve the solutions. Now, of course, as the ambassadors have rightly said, a lot of solutions are already out there. We know, and that is true for smallholder farming, that is true for family, mid-sized farming, and it's true for large farms. We know what can be done differently to significantly reduce emissions without compromising yield, productivity, income, and the welfare of the farmers. That is true at all levels. The solutions are different for smallholders than they are for large farms, but the solutions are out there. They're out there in rice production, they're out there in beef production. You know, it's not like this cannot be done, but what we need to do is create an incentive structure and political support for our farmers, whether they are small, medium, or large, create incentives and provide support to them so that they can make this transition. Farmers want to produce sustainable food. I've never met a farmer who said to me, I don't care. Every farmer looks at their life and at their farm, no matter whether it's a half acre or whether it's a 2,000 hectare farm. Every farmer looks at their farm as something they want to leave in better place for their next generation, and they want to do everything they can. Right now, globally, our governments around the world provide about $700 billion. It's nearly $1 trillion per year to our farmers to support them. It's called agricultural subsidies. Those subsidies at the moment are mostly not tied to getting, at the same time as you support the income and the livelihood of the farmer, to get a real public goods outcome. This money is not tied to better environmental practices, not tied to better nutritional outcomes, because we know that we can produce the calories, but there is no really strong incentive to produce beyond calories healthy, nutritious food, and they are not tied to climate emissions. Now, I say not tied is not exactly accurate. We have a few percent. European Union is about 20% right now. A number of countries are doing their thing. But we need to dramatically accelerate tying the support that we provide to our farmers to making sure that what they do is environmentally friendly. This is not large scale versus small scale, biological, organic farming versus conventional. In all these systems, there is significant ways of reducing emissions. And again, this is not an argument against subsidies. We believe that it is, at this point in time in our history over the next decade, it is absolutely essential that we continue to support our farmers in what they do. But we need to tie it together with them to an outcome that helps not only reduce emissions, but hopefully turn farming as it is today at some point into a system where farmers not only produce food, but they become carbon sinks on their farms. Many farmers are already doing that, and I think it is essential that we, that we help them in this journey. That is the key message on the policy side. In our dialogue with the ministers, we take this very seriously. We have a lot of interest, a lot of support. We're learning from each other. You know, countries are sharing experiences, because as all of you know, when you talk about agriculture subsidies, everybody's like, whoa, 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 I just can't touch this. This is too political. This is too complicated. It's not about that. It's about doing it in a way that gives you this triple outcome. So with that, thank you very much, and I look forward to the deliberations. I think if we do not move forward fast on this, we will not solve the climate crisis. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much to Dr. Jürgen Vogel, who is a World Bank Vice President, the CGIAR System Council Chair. We are going to move on to our panel now, where we are talking about solutions. Always good to start with solutions. We are going to hear from Brazil. We're going to hear from Fernando Camargo, Secretary of State for Agriculture. We are also going to hear, she's not here, but we're going to hear from her, Bita Cash from Germany, Secretary of State there. We're going to hear also from Dr. Abu Bakr Karim, the Minister of Agriculture in Sierra Leone, and from Minette Batters, who's representing the World Farmers Organization. So you might want to put your headsets on for this, because Mr. Camargo is going to respond in Portuguese, I believe. Welcome to you. The question I want to ask you is, what do you think the potential is for new approaches to adaptation and low emissions agriculture?
Bom dia a todos, senhoras e senhores. Tenho a honra de representar a ministra da Agricultura, Pecuária e Abastecimento do Brasil, Tereza Cristina, em nome de quem eu gostaria de agradecer ao Reino Unido e ao Banco Mundial pela organização deste importante diálogo sobre a transição para uma agricultura sustentável. A agricultura brasileira é movida à ciência. Nos últimos 50 anos, desenvolvemos um modelo de agricultura tropical baseado em pesquisa e inovação, que conjuga de forma singular os 3 pilares da sustentabilidade. A partir de investimentos na tropicalização de variedades de plantas e animais, no desenvolvimento de práticas produtivas adaptadas às condições naturais do nosso território e na qualificação de nossos produtores, deixamos de ser um país importador líquido de alimentos e atingimos a condição de terceiro maior exportador mundial de alimentos, fibras e bioenergia. E esse processo de aprimoramento constante continua. Em outubro, o Ministério da Agricultura, a ministra Tereza Cristina, lançou o ABC+, o segundo ciclo do Plano de Agricultura de Baixo Carbono brasileiro, que inaugura uma nova década de incentivos à produção sustentável. Nos primeiros 10 anos do Plano ABC, promovemos a adesão a 6 tecnologias.
Of CO2. That is the size of sustainability of Brazilian farming. Now, in its second decade, the ABC Plus, this new plan, has amplified incorporating new technologies, setting out higher goals and adopting an integrated approach to the landscape, which, besides sustainable production, also promotes the right to land, the preservation of biodiversity and animal biodiversity. The strong focus on adaptation was also preserved in the original ABC plan, since farming is particularly vulnerable to climate change. Until 2030, we will disseminate the low-carbon emission technologies to more than 72 million hectares of farmable land. Promoting increased productivity in farming lands already consolidated without the need to convert new areas to production. That is very important. Brazil, we don't need to take down a tree illegally. We will thus mitigate the emission of the equivalent of more than 1 billion tons of CO2. The transforming potential is, therefore, enormous. We would like to share this experience with countries facing similar realities. And there I'm quoting the African countries that are in the same tropical belt. Only by disseminating good practices to all producers, we will be able to reap the positive impacts that agriculture can have in the sustainable development and climate change. Farming, ladies and gentlemen, is part of the solution. Thank you.
For Agriculture, Fernando Camargo. We are going to hear from Germany now. Now, the Secretary of State, Bita Cash, can't be here, but she has recorded an answer to the following question. We wanted to know really whether she thought that a landscape approach could contribute to incentivize sustainable practices. So let's hear from Bita Cash now.
Ladies and gentlemen, I send my warmest regards from Berlin to you in Glasgow. You have come together to address one of the most pressing issues of our times, climate change. The 2021 Global Hunger Index was not the first report to show that. Besides the COVID-19 pandemic and other conflicts, the climate crisis in particular is further worsening the famine situation. Increasing extreme weather events and destroying crops, threatening food security in many countries around the world. This has made the importance of sustainable food systems more visible. Currently, Madagascar is experiencing the worst drought in 30 years, which is why large parts of the harvest have failed. For this reason, according to the World Food Programme, more than 1 million people there depend on emergency food assistance. This is just one example of many that shows we need to act. Climate change has many causes. Agriculture is one of the contributors to climate change, but it is also affected by climate change and must therefore be part of the solution. The reorientation of the European agriculture policy, which was recently adopted, takes this into account. Environmental protection and climate change mitigation, as well as animal welfare, will in future be linked even more closely with an ecological and productive agriculture sector in the European Union. European agriculture will thus focus on two goals: food security as well as climate action and environmental protection. How are we going to achieve these goals? By tying every euro of funding from Brussels to requirements leading to greater sustainability and climate change mitigation. And in addition to binding and strict requirements, by introducing for the first time an incentive scheme under the first pillar, the ECO schemes. For voluntary and additional environmental and climate services. For Germany, this means in very practical terms that we support the provision of non-productive areas, as well as the extensive use of permanent grassland or the management of agroforestry systems. Farmers themselves can choose which additional services they want to integrate in their operational concepts. In addition, we provide incentives under the so-called agri-environment climate measures, which aim for an even higher degree of ambition at regional level. Within this framework, organic farming is also funded with the goal of having 20% of agricultural land farmed organically by 2030. Furthermore, Germany promotes humus formation and rewetting of drained peatland. Together with the German federal states, we have decided to reduce the animal emissions from drained peatlands by 5 million tons of carbon dioxide by 2030. However, the production of an adequate amount of healthy, diverse food also in future remains our overarching objective. Ladies and gentlemen, in all this, it is also important to stress one thing. We will neither be able to tackle climate change, nor will we be able to establish sustainable food systems by acting independently at national level. We will only overcome both problems if we acknowledge agriculture's key role, increase our efforts to reduce emissions, adapt to climate change, and create sustainable food systems, and if we cooperate beyond national borders. We therefore endorse the policy action agenda presented here. I am convinced that it will turn into a cornerstone for concerted international efforts. In addition to that, the COP26 is an outstanding example of international action and cooperation. I wish you every success in your endeavors.
Thank you very much to Bita Cash, Secretary of State from Germany. We're going to hear from Sierra Leone now. We are going to hear from Dr. Abubakar Karim, who is Minister of Agriculture. And Minister, I suppose what I'd love to hear from you is what role do you think there is for sharing knowledge so that we can achieve transition as early as possible?
Yep. So as we pursue effort to mitigate the negative effect of climate change, Sierra Leone obviously is confronted by numerous challenges. Key among those include addressing the triple burden of youth unemployment, poverty, and food insecurity, land degradation due to unsustainable agricultural practices, particularly slash and burn, for which deforestation due to energy needs, as people seek to meet their needs using firewood and charcoal. Identifying the right incentives to making farming profitable and energy engage young people and the private sector in agriculture is key. In addition, obviously the COVID-19 has limited our fiscal space and placed pressure on the socio-economic and development challenges already prevalent in the country. In the face of all of this, Sierra Leone is highly vulnerable to climate change and faces multiple threats from climate change impacts. Therefore, in 2019, my ministry, Ministry of Agriculture and Forestry, started a policy shift in the agricultural input subsidy and service delivery. The objective of the policy shift is to increase agricultural productivity, particularly rice, which is the main staple food in Sierra Leone. Our policy shift is consistent with Goal 1 of our midterm development program. That is a diversified, resilient green economy. It is also consistent with some of the Sustainable Development Goals. Other objective area to make farming attractive and profitable, support private sector investment in agricultural value chain, ensure that farmers have access to affordable farm inputs and mechanization services, address the high import bill on rice, which is costing us over $200 million annually. We have put in place the necessary institutions and legislature to support private sector investment in agriculture and agribusiness. Going forward, and in line with the tenet of the just rural transition to sustainable agriculture, we are committed to pursuing policies and strategies towards a carbon neutral agriculture. In this respect, we solicit partnership that foster, one, policies and implementation of programs and strategies that work for the private sector, and to enhance accountability on action towards carbon neutral agriculture. Two, programs and actions towards improving the investment climate and crowding foreign direct investment in agribusiness space, particularly for agro-industrial development. Three, predictability of development finance. In this respect, we are in the process of establishing an agricultural investment bank and inventorizing and developing vast inland valley swamps to encourage smallholder farmers to shift from slash and burn farming to more productive lowland farming. On that note, I want to thank you all for your attention.
Minister, thank you very much. Thank you so much for that. Now, we are going to talk a lot about farmers, obviously, today, because, as I said earlier, they are key to achieving our aims. And the next person I'm going to speak to is Minette Batters, who is a member of the World Farmers Organization. Good afternoon to you, Minette. This is a very big question, but it's good to hear it from someone like you who represents farmers all over the world. What is the role of farmers in getting to that, getting towards sustainable agriculture? I know it's a huge question and it's a huge objective, but what is the role?
Well, thank you so much for the opportunity to be here today. I am president of the National Farmers Union here in the UK, but absolutely delighted to be representing the World Farmers Organization, something that we at the NFU are part of and something that I believe passionately in, because so many of the problems we face are because farmers have been kept out of the room. And I really think there is a huge opportunity to change that conversation. But the stakes are enormously high. We have to produce more food than at any time in history to date. We have to do more for nature. We have to do more for biodiversity. We have to sustain our families and we have to sustain our rural communities. And at the WFO, it brings the Russians together, the Americans together, the Europeans together, and the African subsistence farmers together in the same room. And that is why I believe so passionately in it, because it represents all farmers. Now, those conversations, as you can imagine, are not always easy conversations, but everybody has to stay together. We will not beat this challenge unless it is about small, medium, and large together. And earlier this week, the president of the World Farmers Organization, South African farmer Theo de Jager, launched the Climate Makers guidelines for governments across the world to improve implementation of nationally determined contributions, NDCs, in agriculture, starting with what farmers are already doing and building to what they are going to do in the future. Here in the UK, of course, the farmers I represent are well onto that journey. We are a country that has legislated to achieve net zero. And in order to shine an even brighter light on the farmers that I represent, we committed back in 2019 to beating the government target, which was set at 2050, and we said, no, we can do this quicker. We can beat that target, and we can do it by 2040 with the right policies and the right incentives in place. And why did we do that? Because some people at the time thought we were mad. Agriculture is unique. It is, yes, a source of emissions here in the UK. It is 10% of emissions, but it is a source and it is a sink. And with the right policies, we can get to carbon neutral food production. And that is why I was so excited to say what I did back in 2019. Now, we think there are 3 pillars to that thinking. Yes, nature-based solutions, absolutely paramount without a doubt. That is one pillar. More hedges, more trees, more carbon locked down in our grasslands. But climate-smart farming really is the revolution, I think. That is what will drive those new innovations, the new R&D. That is focusing on our efficiencies, but producing more on less land with less inputs. The third pillar is renewable energy and the bioeconomy. Now, all 3 of those, we feel, are essential to achieving that finite goal of carbon-neutral food production. So just in conclusion, we know the eco-warriors are outside marching on the streets. We know people across the world care passionately about this subject. But I am part of the eco-workforce of the future, the farmers across the world that will make the changes that really do hold the opportunity to drive that future and achieve what is needed on 1.5 degrees and are the solution to climate change. Thank you.
Minette, thank you for being such a strong voice for farmers all over the world. Just to bring this panel to a close on the subject of farmers, of course, I mentioned the Just Rural Transition earlier. Farmers all over the world are leading initiatives to address climate and biodiversity loss, and they're calling for public policies and support to help them to do that. So I thought it might be quite instructive just to hear, in case you do not know, about the Just Rural Transition. Next panel, we're going to move on to our next panel, which focuses on innovation. I invite my panelists to come up on stage. And when we talk about innovation, I suppose it's obvious what we mean. To transform agriculture and food systems to deliver nutritious food, resilient livelihoods and prosperity, of course, as well as policy action, we urgently need innovation in technologies, in services and approaches. Now, at the World Leaders Summit earlier this week, leaders launched the call for an innovation breakthrough in agriculture. So I am delighted to welcome our next panel to learn more about the actions we are taking and that others can join in with to deliver on the innovation challenge. Our speakers are Maria Latini, who is from the FAIRR, the F-A-I-R-R initiative. From the UAE, we have Mariam bint Mohammed Saeed Hareb Al-Maidi, Minister of State Water and Food Security. From America, Tom Vilsack, who is a Secretary for Agriculture, and Dr. Claudia Sadov, Managing Director, Research, Delivery and Impact at CGIAR. So thank you very much and welcome everyone. Obviously, remember when you're answering our questions just to press the magical button on your microphones. Maria Latini, I was wondering whether I could start with you. Welcome, first of all. How are your stakeholders using research and innovation to drive sustainable food systems action at the kind of scale that we really need?
Well, thank you. I'm really delighted to be here again. My name is Maria Latini. I'm the Executive Director of the FAIR Initiative. We're a global network of investors whose our member assets total over $45 trillion. And we're the fastest growing ESG network in the world. We provide research to help investors understand and manage the most material financial risks and opportunities in their agricultural investments. What we know is that the food system is absolutely key to achieving Paris goals and global food security challenges. Therefore, we're really delighted to have joined the Global Action Agenda for Innovation in Agriculture. The current food system creates material systemic risks, not only for food security, but to pandemic risk prevention as well. In fact, FAIR's own proprietary research has found that over 70% of the world's largest animal protein companies are at high risk of fostering new zoonotic disease. All of this translates into material financial risk to investors and the capital markets. However, on the positive side, there's a new food revolution that's underway. Companies now accept that diversification into alternative non-animal protein is important and essential tool to managing climate risk. There's a whole host of other ESG risks as well that can be addressed in diversification of protein supply chains. Things like biodiversity loss, water risk, and antibiotic resistance. Through FAIR, our network, investors with over 17 trillion of AUM have been calling on 25 of the largest global food companies in the world to diversify into alternative non-animal proteins and to actually mitigate some of the biggest climate risks associated with their product portfolios. Agricultural innovation is a very new, exciting area. Things like diversification of protein, agroecological agriculture are critical for food security, restoring nature, aligning to 1.5 degrees, and can create millions of new jobs. We need to see agricultural subsidies redirected towards these areas to mobilize public and private finance, including in emerging markets. At COP26, investors with 12 trillion in AUM, with the support of former UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon, called on G20 governments to disclose their agricultural emission reductions targets as part of their NDCs. If we are to achieve Paris goals, there's an urgent need for clear targets for agriculture, including on methane emissions. Investors know they can't address climate risks alone. We need the policymakers to also act for this to be a successful partnership in transforming the food system, and one that works for farmers, for the planet, and for society. Thanks.
Maria, thank you so much. Maria Latini, and thank you for making your remarks so important and so concise at the same time, because we are very much a hostage to time today. We're going to hear next from the UAE, from Her Excellency Mariam bint Mohammed Saeed Hareb Al Meri, Minister of Climate Change and Environment. And I would like to ask you, Minister, how are you catalyzing new investments in agriculture innovation?
Thank you so much, and a wonderful good morning, good afternoon, good evening to all our listeners. First of all, I echo the voices of the previous esteemed speakers that food systems should have the same weight as energy transition, mobility transition. And many of you may ask, why is the United Arab Emirates interested in food systems transition? We are interested because we must, we care, and we feel it's our duty as global responsible citizens. And so we want to work with partners to transforming our food systems. And some of the key insights that we've seen is when we start investing in research and development and innovation and technology, we're seeing fascinating things happening in our own country. We're a water-scarce country. We have less than 5% arable land. And now, using technology, we're able to grow blueberries, raspberries, grow salmon, quinoa, kale, all the kinds of foods that we never would have thought would have been possible in a desert climate that we're facing. So that's why, for us, partnerships, innovation, research and development is key. And I'm sure some of you have seen the great initiative that we have launched together with the United States. AIM for Climate, Agriculture Innovation Mission for Climate, was launched to really drive and accelerate research and development and innovation in food systems transition. So we've got 80 partners on board so far and looking to get more. $4 billion have been secured so far, and we're looking for more. And as many speakers said, we need action now. So we've got the partners, we've got the investment, so now we're really turning to action and inviting all segments of agriculture, starting from smallholder farmers, medium-sized family farmers, all the way up to novelty products such as cellular agriculture and so on. So we're really looking at an inclusive stakeholder engagement for the AIM4C initiative. So I really want to say, come on board and let's take action now. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you. So the same question really to Tom Vilsack, who is the Secretary for Agriculture, the American Secretary for Agriculture. How are you moving through those same new investments?
Well, thank you very much. I certainly appreciate the opportunity to be here today. You know, the U.S. Climate Smart approach must address three key objectives to ensure that our solutions are sustainable, accessible, and provide quantifiable climate benefits. Indeed, first and foremost, from an economic standpoint, farming has to be profitable to ensure that farmers have a decent standard of living and that new farmers are attracted to the profession. Secondly, our approach needs to be socially sustainable, which means that food must be accessible and affordable to all in order to ensure their food and nutrition security. And finally, from a climate standpoint, the sector must be empowered to seize the extraordinary and tremendous opportunity to be part of the solution. Our success hinges on providing stability for our farmers to take risk without sacrificing productivity, and certainly farm programs play a role. Innovation, however, is at the core of our Climate Smart approach. Climate solutions will not come from avoiding technology and innovation, but by encouraging and supporting it. Increased investment in innovation will deliver productivity and efficiency gains that will build resiliency to climate impacts, position producers to be part of the climate solution, and enhance their bottom line, all to the well-being of their rural communities. To foster new climate-smart technology, however, we have to keep markets open for our agricultural products. Innovators will not invest in developing new techniques, and farmers won't apply them if customers can't buy the products. On Tuesday, together with the United Arab Emirates, we launched, as was indicated, the Agriculture Innovation Mission for Climate and announced the $4 billion of initial investment. The U.S. is going to target its initial investments in this enterprise to the next generation of technologies and practices, such as enhanced efficiency fertilizers, feed additives to reduce enteric emissions, improved manure management systems, and new cultivars tolerant to climate impacts. Addressing the challenges facing agriculture and forestry, obviously going to consider all of the tools in the toolbox. President Biden has committed his Build Back Better framework to affirm the commitment of the United States to combat the climate crisis with an historic focus on innovation in climate-smart agriculture and forestry, important conservation practices, and research. At its peak, this investment will result in reaching 100 million crop acres, impacting nearly 200,000 of America's farms, and allowing American agriculture to do its part in meeting an economy-wide goal of a 50 to 52% reduction by 2030. We also have launched a Climate Smart Agriculture and Forestry Partnership Initiative, which is designed to finance a series of large-scale projects that will monitor and analyze the outcomes to ensure that they ensure climate benefits. I'd like to close by noting while the challenges being discussed here today are daunting, I am encouraged by the action we are seeing here. Sustainably increasing agricultural productivity remains a crucial tool to achieving mutual objectives of ending hunger and malnutrition, supporting decent incomes for farmers and farm workers, conserving our natural resources, lowering emissions, and most importantly of all, saving our planet. Thank you.
Secretary of State, thank you very much. Just to conclude this panel, I'm going to talk finally to Dr. Claudia Sadov, who's Managing Director of Research, Delivery and Impact at the CGIAR. And I suppose, Dr. Sadov, the obvious question is, what is the role of research and innovation in all of this?
Thank you so much. And let me begin by thanking the UK for their presidency at this 26th COP and for today raising the importance of protecting and restoring nature for the benefit of people and the climate. I also would very much like to thank Secretary Vilsack and our Honorable Minister Al-Mahiri for the leadership of the United States and the United Arab Emirates in the Aim for Climate agenda. The CGIAR is the world's largest public sector research group that focuses on the science of food, land, and water systems. And we're very pleased to be a key partner in that effort. And by also partnering, as we do, with the UK Global Action Agenda for Innovation in Agriculture, we're reinforcing all of our shared aims to address climate change and to protect nature, while also advancing gender equality, poverty reduction, and food and nutrition security. Because over the last 40 years, we have tripled food production, but at a real cost. We have seen soil erosion, the overuse and pollution of land and water resources, and the degradation of natural habitats. At the same time, stark gender inequalities persist and compromise the potential of our food systems. In recent years, hunger has risen again, and this even before the pandemic. And as Jürgen Vögele has already mentioned, we waste roughly a third of the produced food on the planet. In short, we need a fundamental rethinking. We need evidence-led innovations on a scale that meets the climate challenge, while also responding to the needs of producers and to consumers. So the CGIAR has been on the front lines of global agricultural irrigation for 50 years now, and benefited millions, hundreds of millions of small-scale farmers by delivering innovations like new varieties of food crops that are more nutritious and more resilient to flood and drought, by digital innovations that might give greater visibility to water resources availability and their allocation, by innovative approaches to tackle crop-destroying diseases and pests. Today's more complex challenges and the consensus that we need to tackle them in a different way is what drives the CGIAR. One CGIAR's research and innovation strategy tackles complexity at the level of food, land, and water systems, while also being demand-led to ensure that our work focuses where we can have the greatest impact. Our new portfolio of initiatives is well aligned with the Global Action Agenda and is focused on improving small-scale farmer producers' resilience and reducing greenhouse gas emissions. By driving multi-stakeholder partnerships, by 2030, we aim to reduce 0.6 gigatons of carbon dioxide emission equivalents avoided each year, strengthen the resilience of over 200 million rural farmers, and reduce irrigation water use by about 10% while increasing usable rainwater by 10%. But as has been mentioned, the global levels for investment in research have fallen short. Fortunately, the levels of ambition and commitment that we're hearing at Glasgow here this week are rising and are acknowledging the need to step up global research, to embrace scientific evidence and reorient the way that we produce and consume food to balance human needs and nature's needs while confronting climate change. Thank you.
Thank you. Right, we're going to move on to our final panel now, which is partnerships and collaboration. What do we need to accelerate transition? It's a very important message to kind of send you on your way before we hear from the Secretary of State. Now, through this session, we've heard from farmers, policymakers, research organisations and businesses, and it's clear that no, excuse me, no one actor can deliver the systems change that we need for a climate resilient and sustainable agriculture and food system. Collaboration, of course, has been at the heart of everything, of efforts throughout the COP26 campaign. And I'm pleased to welcome our third and final panel to give us their vision for this as we move on from COP26. We have Agnes Kalibata, who's a special envoy to the 2021 UNFSS. We have Ismail Sunga, Chief Executive Officer, South African Confederation of Agricultural Unions. And we will also hear from India, from Shobha Karandlaje, Minister of State, Farmer Welfare and Agriculture. So Agnes Kalibata, if I could start with you. How do you think we can embed the kind of policies that we have been talking about for sustainable agriculture and food systems in an African context?
So thank you. Let me first of all, like everybody else, really thank the government of the UK for putting food systems and food on the table today, because it's really something that is missing, especially following on the Food Systems Summit. In Africa, going to the question you're asking, 7 out of 10 people live in agriculture. So it's impossible that we would be talking about any development on that continent without talking about sustainable agriculture. So to embed policies and innovations that would work for the agriculture sector in Africa, would have to have 3 considerations. Number one, the priorities of the continent. Right now, 3 things are important: advancing productivity at the smallholder farmer level with drought resistance, advancing access to information, and advancing access to markets so that smallholder farmers can have a productive life. Number 2, building on existing frameworks. The continent has a number of frameworks that work, but also in the Food Systems Summit, we just launched a whole lot of pathways that are clear on how to advance sustainable farming. So we need to build on that. Number 3, ensuring that Africa's agriculture does not become part of the problem, because again, climate change is here to stay. So ensuring that we strengthen its adaptability and resilience, but also ensure that we take on board mitigation measures that the rest of the world would need us to do. So ensuring restoration, ensuring of forests, and ensuring that we reduce the level of damage to the environment would be part of those type of policies would be part of what Africa would be embracing.
Agnes, thank you very much. That is Agnes Kalibata, Special Envoy to the 2021 UNFSS. I'd like to turn to Ismail Sunga now, Chief Executive Officer, South African Confederation of Agricultural Unions. We're talking again about farmers and governments and how they can work together. What is your take on that from an African perspective?
Thank you so much for the invitation and the privilege to speak to you. Really, if one looks at the problems that farmers are facing, they are multifaceted, they are multidimensional, they involve entirely everything. So what is needed really from government and other players is to have a comprehensive approach to addressing the needs of farmers. Let's just go to basics first. I mean, farmers are devoid of the very basic backbone infrastructure in most of the areas they live in. There are no roads, there are no dams, there's no water, educational facilities, no clinics, nothing at all. And to expect that farmers are going to be resilient and are going to be able to manage innovations might be too much to ask. So really we need to focus innovation, investment, government policy, and all other issues around just sorting out ABCs of backbone infrastructure before we start talking about other changes. So that's the starting point. The second point really relates to issues of fairness and equity, particularly with respect to access to production factors. We all know that most farmers, the majority of farmers, don't have access to production factors such as land, finance, entrepreneurship, and everything else. So if we can introduce equity and fairness in scaling up the distribution of access to those facilities, that will enhance widespread change. The third point really is to do with equity and fairness along the value chain itself. We've heard quite a few times that farmers get the highest risk and the lowest return, whilst everyone else walks away with the lowest risk and the highest return. We really need to look at the balance of power within value chains, and we think governments have got a role to play in trying to ensure that there's equity and fairness in that respect. The other point really relates to the non-payment of services that farmers play, ecosystem management services. That also needs to be looked at because, as we heard already, farmers are playing a significant role in that respect. So we need to ensure that there are incentives, there's reward for what they're already doing, and there's also a framework of ensuring that they invest more and better in that respect. So my take is that we really need to sort out some of the issues that are so fundamental to go forward. Let me just also highlight that government and policy really, and as well as digital technology, has got the greatest potential to spread far and wide, to stimulate change far and wide, not only through public sector investments, not through the repurposing of subsidies only, but the entire fiscal and monetary policy framework. For instance, it's possible to encourage investors to go out there in the hinterland where it's not viable, purely by, say, playing around with the VAT regimes, import regimes, so that you can have tax havens, those that want to go and set up digital base stations out there to enable access, and even tax havens for the revenues. The final point really is to do with scaling up. We really need to up the ante. We need big ambitions. We cannot really rely on pilots, so we need big ambitions. In this respect, I just want to call out 3 initiatives. One is the World Economic Forum 100 Million Farmers, a carbon net zero farmers initiative, which has been launched, as well as our own ambition as the Southern African Confederation of Agricultural Unions to start with 100,000 young generation carbon farmers in the next few years. And then the third one really is about the climate makers that has been alluded to already, that is being managed by the World Farmers Organization. The tagline really being that let's go big, let's be ambitious, and policy and digital technology solutions can play a significant role in that respect. Over. Thank you.
Ishmael Sunga, thank you very much for that. We are coming to the end of the third panel. We're going to hear now from India, of course, very important. And the same question really about how government and farmers can work together in India. We're going to hear from Shobha Karandlaje, who is the Minister of State for Farmer Welfare and Agriculture.
Farmers are vulnerable to impacts of climate change, water scarcity and land degradation. In addition, extreme weather events, rising input costs and post-harvest losses pose an enormous challenge to sustaining agriculture growth. Learning from the outcomes of our green revolution and having achieved self-sufficiency in all agri-commodities bearing edible oil, India focuses on sustainable agriculture based on our 15 agroclimatic zones. Traditional knowledge of farmers, emphasis on bringing back agri-produce to the plate, crop diversification, all in all to improve soil health, increase water use efficiency in agriculture, overarching concern being improved livelihoods for the farmers. Demonstrations of climate resilient sustainable practices and technologies have been taken up in 151 climatically vulnerable districts, and 446 villages under National Innovations in Climate Resilient Agriculture project since 2011, operated by the Indian Council of Agriculture Research. Agricultural contingency plans have been developed for 650 districts to address extreme weather conditions to help farmers of different agroclimatic zones of India. Organic farming, India ranks 5th in terms of area and 1st in terms of number of farmers, which includes natural farming. Certification of large traditional contiguous organic areas of the country is also being done. A cross-ministerial approach works in India, cutting across agriculture, animal husbandry, dairying, fisheries, food processing industries, rural development, environment, forests and climate change, National Nutrition Mission, midday meals program, rations and meals for pre and postnatal women and infants, etc. This synergy is helping pool in resources, both soft and financial. The grassroots system of local self-government, Panchayat Raj, is bringing in greater ownership of all government programs as well as catalyzing private sector, including CSR partnerships. Thank you.
Thank you so much to Shobha Karandlaje. She is the Minister of State, Farmer Welfare and Agriculture for India, and that concludes the panel. I should say, just before I introduce the Secretary of State, that it is so rare that we get everyone, all of you people in the same room at the same time, that it would be fantastic after the Secretary of State finishes speaking if we'd have all our panelists back together for a photograph so that we can record the moment for posterity. So do bear that in mind. Thank you to all our panelists. Now, to close the session, I invite the Secretary of State for Environment, Food and Rural Affairs, George Eustice.
Well, thank you very much, and I'm delighted to conclude this session on sustainable agriculture and add my thanks to all of the fantastic contributions we've had from panelists today. Now, as Jürgen said in his opening comments, all too often this issue has been sometimes considered a little too difficult to address at events like this, but it is of critical importance to the challenges that we face. And I think that through this dialogue, we've seen a number of common themes from around the world, and we've mobilized action for transformation in agriculture, land use and food systems, the kind of changes that are essential to achieve Paris Agreement and Sustainable Development Goals. Countries have shared their experiences and increased ambition on their policies and on the innovation necessary to drive sustainable agriculture. So this has included Brazil's plans to scale up sustainable technologies and farming systems to cover 72 million hectares of land and to mitigate 1 billion tons of greenhouse gas emissions by 2030. It includes the European Commission's decision to link all funding for agriculture to sustainability and climate change mitigation. Germany's strategy to introduce a new set of eco-schemes helping farmers transition to more climate and environmental friendly practices. Plans to explore carbon farming and its aims to ensure that 20% of land is organically farmed by 2030. And India's plan to scale up its mission organic value chain in the northeast to reach a further 100,000 farmers with support for improved sustainability of agricultural land. Now, we've also heard from governments in Africa about the need for agricultural innovation, including climate-resilient seed varieties, digital advisory services, and conservation agriculture to deliver on adaptation, resilience, and our mitigation goals. And we heard about ambitious plans African governments are putting in place, such as in Morocco, to help farmers use water more sustainably, and Sierra Leone's ambitions for carbon-neutral farming by 2040. Through the policy dialogue, countries have identified opportunities for redirecting resources from the 700 billion in annual support to agriculture away from harmful practices towards sustainable ones, enabling and supporting farmers to tackle climate change. And through this, we developed a policy action agenda, setting out a framework for action. 16 countries, as well as 16 non-state actors, have endorsed this agenda, showing leadership and commitment to sustainable agriculture. And we would welcome and invite others to join us. We have mobilized investment for research and innovation. The Global Action Agenda brings together over 150 government and non-state stakeholders to an alliance to agree research priorities and scale up effective innovation. Now, in the UK, under our own net zero strategy, 75% of farmers will have low carbon practices by 2030. And we heard from our own farming representatives about their ambitions in this area. Our initial projections are that the Sustainable Farming Incentive Scheme, which focuses on soil health, could deliver average potential greenhouse gas savings of up to 60,000 tonnes of CO2 equivalent in England annually over the fourth carbon budget, which is a period that runs from 2023 to 2027. The UK will be providing £65 million to a Just Rural Transition Support Programme. This will support developing countries to design and implement policies that help their farmers build resilience and that drives investment into more sustainable farming practices, such as new crop varieties that are climate resilient and more nutritious micronutrients and food. It also will support measures to protect and restore water quality and soil health, and trialling incentive schemes, such as the payment for ecological services. The UK is also joining the Agriculture Innovation Mission for Climate to increase and accelerate innovation, helping ensure that sustainable, climate-smart agriculture is more attractive and widely adopted than unsustainable practices in all regions by 2030. And I'm pleased to confirm £38.5 million from the UK to support the International Agricultural Research System, the CGIAR, for research and innovation to address the climate crisis and to protect nature whilst assuring our food security. Now, as COP presidency with the World Bank, we will continue this peer-to-peer policy dialogue to share experiences and resolve the policy barriers that exist to sustainable agriculture. We will continue to support engagement and collaboration through existing channels, such as the Coronivia Joint Working Group on Agriculture, the Global Forum on Food and Agriculture hosted by Germany, the Just Rural Transition Initiative, with allies of the Global Action Agenda for Innovation in Agriculture. The Glasgow Innovation Breakthrough on Agriculture, announced at the World Leaders Summit, sets us a huge challenge to make climate resilient, sustainable agriculture more attractive and more widely adopted than unsustainable practices by 2030, bringing dividends both for people and for nature and for our climate. Today, let us commit to working together to place agriculture and food production on a more sustainable path. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Secretary of State, for that. And thank you to all of you for listening in and watching this session today. As I said, I would like to invite all the panelists that we've had on this afternoon to come back on stage, and then we will record the moment for posterity. So let's wait for them to come on, and then we'll have a photograph.
Ladies and gentlemen, that concludes our session. In order to help us to keep running our sessions to time, would you please leave now as quickly as possible? Thank you.